There we go. Sorry, I couldn't unmute for a moment. I want to thank you very much, everyone who's organized this session, everyone who's attending, for joining. As Andy and Roland had said, I am an infectious disease researcher and a scientist at the University of Toronto, but I'm also an essential caregiver, and I and my partner were the primary caregivers for my mom and dad for nearly 10 years, who both had and have dementia. And I worked for years as a PSW while I was going through school. So I have a lot of reasons that I really wanted to provide support to people who are working in this setting, living in it, linked to it in some way. I think that it's a setting that has borne a lot of the brunt of restrictions and really difficult conditions during COVID without a lot of support. And so the reason I started these sessions was I wanted people to be able to come to a place and ask whatever questions they wanted, feeling perfectly comfortable about it. We do sessions every night from 8 to 10 where people can be anonymous as well. And I've put the link to that into the chat if you want to share that further. But it's very important for people to be able to make good decisions about their own health and the health of people they love. And most of us, we're all human beings. Most of us need to be able to think, and many of us need to be able to talk to other people to make some of these decisions. It may not be easy to access your doctor on short notice at this time. Pharmacists are also an excellent resource. But we do know that people have a lot of questions, and there are new questions every week. And so that's why we do this. So that's me, but I'm just the person who started this, one morning on January 4th. There are a bunch of people who are here right now, plus a lot of other scientists and healthcare workers with special expertise in this area, who join these calls every night in all of our special sessions. We speak amongst us multiple languages. So, well, I'm sort of bilingual, but Fred underneath is fully bilingual. So people can ask questions if we speak a language that you're more comfortable in. We can also interact in another language. So to my right on my screen is Dr. Junior Diaz. Junior, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Junior Diaz. I'm a Brazilian speaking from Brazil. My background is molecular biology. And the reason I'm doing this is because, as Tara mentioned before, people should know about all the correct informations regarding COVID-19 vaccines. And also I've been doing volunteer work since 1997. So that's a way that I believe that I can pay back all the good things that I received in life. Thank you for joining us. And if there is anyone who doesn't understand English but prefer Portuguese or Spanish, I can translate as well.
Thank you, Junior. And then next is Dr. Amy Tan. Amy, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Amy Tan. I'm coming to you from Victoria. I am a family physician and a palliative care physician. I am medical director for Victoria Hospice here. So I've been in practice for 17 years, and I have 17 years of talking about vaccines to my patients. And I've also been advocating publicly and privately for safety for COVID. So very excited to have the opportunity to help in whatever way I can. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And Amy, do you speak any additional languages that people can reach you through?
Not well enough.
You're like
sorry.
me. Well,
no.
I know.
No, not well enough.
Yeah, I know. No one wants to hear me speak French. Yeah. Okay. And then il y a Dr. Frédéric Langlois, who comes to us from the beautiful city of Ottawa.
Yes, I'm from Ottawa. I'm a senior scientist for Health Canada, where I do research and evaluations in the field of pharmacology and chemistry. But prior to that, I did a PhD in molecular biology on our mechanisms of RNA transmission, transcription. And I've had experience in working experience in virology and immunology. So that gives me a good, fairly good understanding of the vaccine. Other than that, I've worked casual jobs in hospitals and LTCs while in school. And I've been until very recently a union steward for PIPS.
Thank you very much, Fred. And then we have Dr. Priedel Patel.
Hi everyone, my name's Priedel. I'm a Canadian, but I'm in Australia. And like Roland, I'd like to quickly just acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and their elders past, present, and emerging. With that, I would like to say that I'm a scientist and I have a background in molecular biology, so I can answer any questions related to the mRNA technologies, DNA, RNA, any concerns of that sort. In Australia, I've been involved with interviewing healthcare workers, working with patients with COVID-19, and so trying to understand where the risks are and how to mitigate them. And I, like the rest of the world, have been so touched by all of the work that essential workers have been doing, and this is my way of paying back as much as I can. So please feel free to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Priedel. And then we have Dr. Linda Dresser.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Linda. I am a pharmacist, and I've been a pharmacist for 30 some years, and I have worked both in community and primarily in hospital. I'm also an assistant professor at the University of Toronto in the Faculty of Pharmacy. And my area of particular interest and expertise is also infectious diseases. And I have a lot of interest in travel medicine, global health, and all things infection. So I hope that I can answer some of the clinical questions that you might have this evening along with your Dr. Pam.
Thank you very much, Linda. And then we have Dr. Krishana Sinkar.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. So I'm Krishana. I completed my PhD in molecular and cellular biology, so somewhat similar training background to Priedel, and I'm not sure anyone else on the call, perhaps Frederick. So I can also answer any of your questions regarding the vaccines, especially around mRNA, the transcription, DNA, debunking any sort of misinformation that you're hearing. But I'm also here to listen and learn and also validate any concerns and questions that you have. I think I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone on this panel, but I think we all can appreciate that a lot of this is new for a lot of people, and so we are here simply to help answer any questions that you have.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all of us. Andy, would you like to read out some of the questions you've received by email first, or how would you like us to proceed?
Are you going to make any kind of presentation at all, Dr. Mirardi, about things, or do you want us just to start with asking?
Well, normally we just dive into the questions because there's usually a really big range of them. And if we do the presentation, it eats up a bit more time. So we just get straight to the questions, if that's okay with you.
That's fine, thank you. And so if people have questions, if you just put them in the chat box, and then I'll go over them once they're received. But and I know Rolly has some questions that were sent to us prior to. But I'd like to just start off, if I can, seeing as I've got the floor, and see if we could get some comments from the panel on what we learned today about the vaccine being delayed, and the province planning on expanding the wait time in between the first and the second dose, and I believe it was up to 40 days they were talking about. Perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong, but do you have any comments on your feelings about that latest thing that's evolved?
Well, I mean, I think the problem is there's not really a lot that can be done about it if we're not getting the vaccines. I mean, I'm not, so this is a worldwide problem in many ways, but it may be that is what just has to be done. I do know that Ontario has committed to maintaining the manufacturer recommended dosing schedule for people who live in long-term care to ensure that they have the maximal protection possible because their lives are at greatest risk. And then for everyone else, which would be primarily healthcare workers and essential caregivers, I know that those schedules may be altered. I don't know further than that whether there will be sort of sub-triaging of who will have delayed doses or not. Today, I haven't caught up in the news yet today, so I'm not as fully up to date on this issue. But there could be others on the call who have seen that today and know more about what the specifics might be.
Yeah, so I can jump in here. I'm all like Tara, not probably up to date from yesterday as to the delay of the vaccines getting here. But I did want to say that in the UK, I know they're looking at people who do get the vaccine a little bit later, so a little bit more delayed than the manufacturers. So Pfizer and Moderna have given permission for, well, not permission, but recommendations based on their studies, having the second dose of the vaccine given to them. And so they're looking to see whether or not this would be effective on people in the UK. So that would be very interesting to see what their results are regarding that. But in terms of the delay, I'm just going to echo what Tara said. It's pretty much right now we have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, so I think that certainly for absolutely the highest risk people, you want to try to maintain that dosing schedule. And when we say highest risk, we're talking about the people who are at highest risk of severe illness, disability, and death. So those would be the people you want to make sure that the protection is maximal. But I don't know how the decisions will be made. Linda, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I guess I did hear a bit of the news brief today. I didn't catch all of it, but I do know that they were saying what Tara had said, that we're trying to maintain the recommended interval for the vaccines in the long-term care facility, and then others such as the healthcare workers and essential workers who have received their first dose may end up with a more delay in between. And I would like to reassure people that that delay is not an unreasonable approach, particularly for younger, more more healthy people. And that it's not an uncommon approach, and that we do this with other vaccines as well. There's a window of opportunity for that second dose. It doesn't have to be right at that day that was in the studies. And there are a lot of other vaccines where, the second dose is often recommended between, for example, with the vaccine against shingles, it's a 2 to 6 month. We might even push that window out a bit in some cases because we think widening it in fact gives an even bigger boost with that second dose. And the studies did show that there was activity out. And I think what I heard from the companies were that they may be comfortable without that 40-day window that they had looked at, but not beyond that. So they certainly want us to stick as close as we can to what was done and what is in their product material, but extending it is not out of the realm of ordinary with vaccines. And I don't know if Dr. Tan wants to also comment on that from her perspective as well.
Yeah, I was going to say there's many vaccines. I mean, obviously this is new and it's under a lot of scrutiny, but there's many vaccines from shingles to hepatitis B that are multi-dose that in the years that I've been giving them or giving prescriptions for, we haven't stressed too much about the exact day. It definitely is a window, and it's definitely not ruled out to the same type of military precision that we're seeing. And so I think it's interesting, but I think also I take some solace in that, knowing that we're not talking like a year away. We're talking within a matter of a few days to a couple of weeks. Obviously need to look at the data, but I think there's lots of precedent to show with multi-dose vaccinations that we've been using for decades, thankfully, that the specific day is not as important.
Okay, thank you. And with that, maybe we'll move on to our next question. So we hear a lot from women who either are pregnant or maybe planning to become pregnant who worry about taking vaccine, getting the vaccine related to that. Can you comment to that concern?
Yes. Oh, that's a very, very common concern. It's probably the most common concern that people express when we talk to people in other sessions, and you know, it's something that, I mean, it's reasonable to be concerned about it and want to know more information. So first of all, there are a lot of claims out there that the vaccines, that the COVID-19 vaccines that we currently have, the mRNA vaccines, that they disrupt or they impair women's fertility. This is actually not true. There's no evidence for this, and the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists had to release a statement several days ago, Friday of last week, I guess, providing a summary of this and saying that from their point of view that there's no evidence that these vaccines affect fertility. This is a common form of misinformation, and this is a common form of misinformation that's been around for all vaccines pretty much, and there's no evidence to support it, but it's a common form of vaccine misinformation. As far as pregnant and breastfeeding women go, actually, you know what, maybe what I'll do is perhaps the Dr. Tan or Dr. Dresser can answer these questions as the clinicians on the call. But certainly there have been statements also issued about this by other associations.
I also saw that Frederick had his hand up too. I don't know if there was something, but go ahead, Amy.
No, Frederick, did you have something?
I just wanted to speak to a regulatory perspective. So it's very rare that a new product will be tested on women that can be pregnant, and certainly not pregnant women or breastfeeding women. So, you know, the fact that it's not authorized for pregnant women is basically just a matter of legal liability. It hasn't been tested. Doesn't mean there is absolutely no plausible reason to fear the vaccine. And I can let Dr. Tan, Dr. Dresser speak to it from a clinical perspective. But as far as RNA go, it's not something that will intercalate in DNA, so that cannot cause congenital malformations. There's zero chance it might cause miscarriage or anything. Like RNA gets degraded in the body rather quickly.
Yeah, and so that's what I've been telling my patients and my colleagues. I run a unit now, and so I have many people confidentially emailing me saying, Dr. Tan, don't tell anybody, but you know, I'm X weeks pregnant and should I get it? And I say with very good conscience, there is no reason to not get it, because it's going to help you. It's going to help during your pregnancy. It's not going to have any bearing on if you are planning on getting pregnant in the next 6 months. And if you're breastfeeding, all the more reason. And so we know that, unfortunately, COVID actually is harder on women who are pregnant because of different changes to your immune system. And we know that pregnant women actually are more at risk of hospitalizations and need for ventilation. And so the risks, I mean, there's zero, I can't say anything in life is zero risk, but the minuscule theoretical risk of anything, as Dr. Langlois just said, is so outweighed by the benefits of getting the vaccine and protecting yourself and your unborn child from getting COVID, and if you're breastfeeding, to protect your baby.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said it better.
Thumbs up from the group here. So kind of related.
Yeah.
Kind of related to that last question, we've got a question here about people who have a lot of allergies and reactions to other drugs. and concerns around getting the vaccine related to that.
Yeah. Oh, I think that might be a great question for Dr. Dresser.
Yeah, I can take the first stab at that, and anybody can add in. The vaccines do not have some of the allergy concerns that some of the other vaccines do. In fact, these vaccines are really well tolerated from an allergy perspective. If you're allergic to one ingredient really, which is something called polysorbate, you might have taken a preparation to clean out your bowel. That's the ingredient that some people are allergic to. It's also sometimes in skin creams. If you're allergic to that, you know you're allergic to that. When you go to have the vaccine, they'll go through that information. But if you're allergic to other drugs, if you're allergic to other foods, we sometimes get asked about being allergic to penicillin. We sometimes get asked about allergies to egg, which is in some other vaccines. None of those allergies are a concern with these vaccines. It's very well tolerated.
Yeah. And if I could add to that, there have now been nearly 50 million people around the world who've been vaccinated with these mRNA vaccines. And the rate of serious adverse events have been exceptionally low for these vaccines. So we really we're starting to have a lot of experience with them now, with millions vaccinated, and they're looking pretty fantastic from a safety profile.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to add so this is not allergies, but just in terms of side effects, because we do get that question a lot. Yes, there are side effects just like to any medications, but typically the side effects are things like headaches, fatigue, fever, but these tend to be just our immune system working. So it's not something to get scared or fearful about. If you do experience those kinds of side effects, it's typically just when our immune system starts to work because you've gotten the vaccine.
And it's for a couple of days usually, Krishana, right? It's not much longer after the vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. So most of it is not, yeah. And I don't know if people have seen this, but this question was also asked to Dr. Anthony Fauci in terms of like long-term effects. And so he says that typically any sort of long-term effect to a vaccine would be seen within 30 and 45 days. And we don't typically see any sort of long-term effects from vaccines years or, 1 to several years past that. So I know that's also been another question that people have asked a lot as well.
Yeah. And so many people have been vaccinated much longer than 30 to 45 days ago of the people who've been vaccinated so far. The other thing I was going to add is that most serious vaccine reactions happen within the first 15 minutes of vaccination. So this is why when you are vaccinated, you're asked to stay for 15 minutes so that the vaccination team can keep an eye on you. And if you let them know that you have other underlying allergies or anything else they might want to keep an eye on, they'll keep you there for a bit longer, maybe for half an hour. But the serious adverse events that are associated with vaccination are almost immediately right after the vaccine. So that may also be something that will help people be a little bit less concerned at the time of vaccination.
Thank you. So we'll go to our next question. If I could find it again here, sorry. What would you say would be a sort of a good way to start or express a conversation with our members who are nervous and fearful about getting the vaccine? Can you give us some tips on how to have that conversation?
Well, first of all, I would say it's quite normal for people to be worried, right? Anything new, we all have a little bit of fear associated with it. And it's just like when COVID first came, we all had a lot of fear associated with it. And then some of that wore off. In this case, maybe it would have been good to sustain some of the fear associated with it. But it's partly because it's new, and it's partly because there's so much information out there. I mean, I'm an infectious disease scientist, and I can sift through this material quickly. I can usually stay on top of things. There is so much that it's tough even for me. It's tough for all of us here. And so, so it's not surprising that people want to be able to think and find out more, and maybe kind of overwhelmed by trying to seek out that information themselves. Not to mention that many people, especially PSW, especially people working in long-term care, essential workers, are quite exhausted right now. People are routinely working 50-hour weeks. Most have their own families that they have to take care of, other people they care for at home. It's absolutely exhausting. And so what I would say is that I think it's important that people who are needing to make these decisions quickly have support. You're always welcome to share our link, because we do a session every single night from 8 to 10. People can drop in anonymously and they can ask whatever questions they want. But I think that providing support to people until they feel comfortable is the best approach. And that the large majority of people will, once they've had a chance to find out more and feel a bit more comfortable, will be fine with vaccination, but they just need a little bit of time and support to get there. And there will always be some who will say, no matter what, I'm not going to get any vaccine, but they're a small percentage of people. And most people want to make a good decision for themselves and for other people.
Yeah, I think I have 2 points that I can add to this. So I think it's important to, I think one really good thing is and I know not everyone has access to someone who, probably is a healthcare worker or a scientist, but if they do happen to speak to someone like that, if they manage to join sessions like these, hopefully we can have these kinds of open, honest conversations with them, and they would feel some sort of relief or alleviate some of their fears. This is something I think Priedel mentioned before, and I'll leave it to her. She can probably talk about it more. But if you're on social media, for example, like on Twitter, lots of healthcare professionals who have been on the front lines and managed to get the vaccines have been sharing pictures of themselves getting the vaccines with the hashtag, I believe, "This is my shot." Is that it, Priedel?
This is our shot.
This is our shot. And so for me, quite personally, seeing a lot of these images, although I didn't have hesitancy about it, but just seeing those, the images of people getting the vaccines, it just made me feel better. I know that I'm not alone. I know people are getting it. And I know these are people who are experts who understand and have faith in the science, and they are putting, they're doing it. So, it's not like they're putting their lives at risk. If they believe in it, then that means, it gives me some level of comfort. Also, there are people from different communities who are doing it. So I know there was a question in the chat too about the Black community, and I'm talking about sickle cell anemia, and I'll let that question come up. But seeing, different healthcare professionals or scientists from different communities and different ethnicities who are also getting the shot, personally also helps, myself and other people feel more comfortable about it. So those are the 2 points that I would say. If people have access to, a panel like this, hopefully, and also seeing the images of other people getting the shot of the vaccine.
I just want to add something that I have been thinking about it for quite a time, that all of these vaccines, they come from companies. So imagine if they get just one vaccine that it doesn't work, or it has a really severe adverse reaction to massive people. I don't think that they would release that, or they put their names on the vaccine, because in the end, and also in the beginning, they are companies. They don't want to mess up with their names also.
Well, I mean, not to mention that there are regulatory agencies all over the world, independent agencies in every country that has approved these vaccines. They're the ones who monitor and report on the adverse events. It's not the companies. And so at this point, it's completely out of the hands of the companies. The information flow is through these regulatory agencies, so it's independent of them. And there are many countries in the world all doing this independently and sharing information with each other. So it's as sort of independent, arm's length from the companies as it could possibly get.
Also, I'd just quickly like to add to Krishana's point with regards to the Black community. The trials, they'd ensured that they had recruited quite diverse diverse communities. And I know the number from Moderna, they had recruited 10% of their entire trial participants were from the Black community. A fifth were Hispanic and 4% were Asian. So we've got very, very carefully scrutinized data on these, on members of these communities. And so there's no reason to think that they would be unsafe for any particular community. But a lot of, I think what's really important for us is to do a lot of outreach, amplify the voices of people of color to make sure that they're really well represented in the people that are getting vaccinated, and that we're making these sessions available in as many languages as we speak. So this is a platform where I can also speak to the South Asian community if they have any questions, and I can answer them in Gujarati or Hindi. And the rest of the panel has mentioned the languages that they speak. So I think that's also really important to point out.
Thank you. And we'll move on to our next question for comments. And it's, I just saw Frederick posted in the chat, and it was one of the questions that we had been sent on effectiveness of a single dose of the Pfizer vaccine. And I think you say it's 52.4%.
Yes, it's they saw 52.4% effectiveness between the first and second dose. So they're in those 21 days. And what they reported seeing is the efficacy, the vaccine fails usually right. If it fails, it's right after the first dose because it takes a little time for immunity to develop. So because what happens with the RNA vaccine, the RNA goes into the cells will decode the RNA into proteins, will express, it's a viral protein they express, just a small part. And then the body will recognize, the immune system will recognize and then produce antibodies. And that takes a little time. And what they saw is it takes about 10 days. Now, that doesn't mean at 10 days you're safe. At 10 days, you might have 50% chances of being protected. But that's about what we know. There's a lot of unknown. This doesn't mean the timing between the two doses, we don't know just because it hasn't been tested sufficiently. It's just they did that schedule because it was a dedicated guess when they designed their clinical trial. They had to go quickly, so they couldn't test every possibility. But there is some efficacy quite quickly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so our next question would be, how long do you think it will be until children can get vaccinated?
That's an important question. Adolescents have, so enrollment of adolescents in trials for the mRNA vaccines has already started. The Pfizer vaccine is fully enrolled, which means that they've completely reached all the numbers of volunteers in the placebo and the vaccine arm of that trial. And the Moderna vaccine is still enrolling. We probably should we will get some earlier results. Initially, we'll certainly get a lot of the safety results soon, so we'll start having a better idea. But we'll probably see the final results of these trials in about 3 to 4 months. And as the safety data and other data start coming out, they'll probably start enrolling children in trials as well, not to vaccinate them right away, but to get people signed up as volunteers. And it's a much longer process, obviously, with children in trials. So those will probably start after the trials in adolescents. And my guess, we never know, right? I mean, and the process can be slow, but my guess is that we would probably be looking at towards the end of the summer-ish for when we would know if the vaccines are authorized for children. And Fred might have a better idea about that.
I'm not privy to when things would be authorized, and if I was, I couldn't speak to it. In terms of immunity, younger infants have don't have an as active immune system, so it might not be as effective. But immunity, the vaccination schedules for children occur quite young, so we know that for other vaccines it's effective at a young age. So it's only a matter of time we'll see those authorizations. Because out of abundance of caution, they have to put these roadblocks to make sure there are no contraindications, there's no safety issues. So there's a lot of people at Health Canada working on this right now to make sure that it's absolutely safe, and we're all hoping we can vaccinate children as fast as possible so they can return to school.
And this is the norm for all medications. I wanted to point out, not just vaccines, everything. You always start in adults, and then you sort of move down. And this is the norm, and it's just following that normal safety process. And Amy has something to say here.
Yeah, so I was just going to say exactly what you just said. But as a family doctor,
yeah.
You talk about, the adolescent age and when do you move adult dosing to pediatric dosing and vice versa. And when, at 16, can you start using adult medications off label or to adolescents? And so it's part of crossing every T and dotting every I. But yeah, we give vaccines to at 2, 4, 6 months age and 12 months of age and 18 months of age. And I have an 11-year-old, he just turned 12 last week. So sorry, I have a 12-year-old and we're chomping at the bit for him to get this vaccine, as I'm still waiting for mine too. So it's really just being extra cautious. There's no, inside scoop that there's a concern. It's really about regulation.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next question would be what?
And I actually.
Sorry?
Oh, sorry. I was actually just quickly going to say, my mom, who's in the dementia unit of a retirement home, she was vaccinated, and I was the one who gave authorization for that, and I know it's safe, so I was thrilled for her to be vaccinated. And as her essential caregiver, I'm still on the list, and I haven't been scheduled yet, but I'm going to take it as soon as I can get it. So from my point of view, I understand the vaccines and I know they're safe, and I have no doubt about taking them myself. And I think most others on this call would say the same.
Thank you. So our next question would be, what if any other mRNA vaccines are currently in use? And after this question, I'll get Rolly to ask a few questions that were sent to us prior to this session.
Okay.
So the question was,
anyone want to take the first crack?
I think Frederick would go.
I don't know all of the vaccines, but I did my PhD in a cancer research center. And at the time, they were looking into personalized mRNA vaccines to target cancers. And so a lot of research, the technology is really old and it's quite simple. And at the time, it was just how to target the cancer cells. But there've been clinical trials in humans, and they've been actually they actually treated patients, cancer patients, with personalized mRNA vaccines.
Just to add to that, mRNA vaccine testing has been going on for a really, really long time. The injection of RNA, it's the reason why it hasn't progressed into a product that is available right now is because RNA itself is very unstable. And it was only up until about 5 years ago that companies started to develop ways to stabilize this mRNA molecule long enough to be able to inject it into somebody, and it would just stay for long enough to allow for the proteins to be made. So although the mRNA technologies have been around for a really long time, they've become more effective because of these slight modifications in the mRNA, and a lot of research into how to deliver these into our cells more efficiently. So if if the pandemic had come 5 years ago, we wouldn't have had the progress and the leaps that we've made in the delivery of these mRNA vaccines. So all of this research from a long time ago has all come together in such a timely way to allow us to produce these mRNA vaccines. So I'll just quickly mention that the RNA itself, or the mRNA itself, is very unstable. We make it in our bodies, and it determines our homeostasis, how to react to changes in temperature. All of that involves changes in RNA, and the half-life of it. So half of it gets degraded in a couple of minutes, so 2 or 3 minutes. But within the vaccines, if you had something that degraded in 2 to 3 minutes, then we wouldn't be able to keep it around long enough to make the viral proteins. But with these new technologies, the stabilization of the mRNA probably stays around a day or two. And this allows for our body to read all of the codes properly and make the spike protein almost like, think about it as a photo. It allows us to make a photo and plaster it everywhere in our body to say, hey, this thing is wanted. If you ever come across it, please destroy it. And so that's sort of the reason why we've got an approved product now, but it wasn't possible to get an approved product before. But also to drive home the point that RNA has been injected into many, many people. We've got really long-term data on, there's about 1,000 people, if you look back, I think to the 2010 time point, there's about 1,000 people who have received mRNA at that point and not had any long-term effects. And like Krishana said, if there was any long-term effect, we would expect to see it within 2 months. Which was like Dr. Fauci said, something that the regulatory bodies had said, that at least 50% of your participants have to have received the second dose for at least 2 months. At least 50%, let me try this again. At least 50% of the participants should have had at least 2 months of monitoring post their second dose for you to be able to submit a document to us to allow for regulatory approval. So this is, I know it's a bit scary to think that there's no current mRNA product that's out there, but these are the reasons that I'd mentioned that allow us to have faith in the product and its safety.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rolly, are you on? Did you have some questions to put to our panelists?
So I had 3 questions from Marty, and 2 of the 3 have been answered.
Okay.
So the one remaining question, has there been any studies for genetic markers as to why some people recover from the virus in 2 weeks with no remaining side effects? Some healthy younger adults with no pre-existing conditions die very fast. Some recover after intubation in ICU with long-term negative side effects. Who's seeking a response with respect to that?
This is the holy grail. I mean, we would all like to know this right now. There are many research teams studying it around the world. We don't really understand why. Some people may be genetically a little bit more susceptible to it, but we don't really have a clear picture yet of what is happening, except that some people are a bit more vulnerable. But we will probably, we're probably going to know more in a year or so, but at this point, it's not clear. There are also, the contributions of other factors. So, if people have diabetes or cardiovascular disease or are pregnant, for example, these are risk factors that make them more likely to develop more severe COVID. So we know what these risk factors are that are associated with more severe disease, but we do not really know why yet, certainly not definitively. And there are studies in Canada of long COVID that are undergoing right now. So this is being studied in the Canadian population too.
Thank you. So
does that answer the question? Is that helpful?
I think so.
Okay, just let us know, because we don't always know, get things across in the way that, so please let us know if we don't get it right.
Yeah.
Or not right for you. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll hear about it if we feel that way. So there's another question that is interesting, and it's one person's question is, they were told if someone is on anticoagulants, then they shouldn't receive or aren't eligible to receive the vaccine. So not only is if that's true, but are there other common drugs that people might be taking that would make them not good candidates for the vaccine?
Yeah. So it's about the anticoagulants. It's not an issue, but we're going to pass this to the pharmacist because this is her bread and butter.
All right.
Linda, you want to take her away?
Yeah. And
Linda's job.
And Amy can also chime in from her experience with her patients on. I'm sure a number of your patients are on many, many different drugs, and that anticoagulants, warfarin is the most common anticoagulant that people know and are on. That is not an issue. In fact, we would like you to still get your vaccine for sure, because you may have a condition that puts you at greater risk of getting COVID and having a bad outcome with COVID. So that is not a contraindication. There are a few drugs where we would certainly take pause and want to think about whether or not we have to hold the medication for a bit before we give you a vaccine, but those are very few. And that's fairly common for many sort of vaccines. So if you're currently on antibiotics for an infection and you currently have an infection of some sort, we'd probably want to wait until you'd recovered from that infection before we gave you this vaccine. Certainly it could be an issue with that. So that's the one place where we would really want to say pause. So there's some other drugs, but I think that's a little more complicated to go into. And I would just suggest that if you're on a lot of drugs, that you have a conversation with your pharmacist and your physician, and we go through them individually and take a real close look at them. But for the most part, this is one of those vaccines where we're like, you're good to go. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, to Amy.
I was going to say, yeah. So if you are on warfarin or you're on a newer anticoagulant, by virtue of being on those medications, you're going to be considered higher risk for COVID. So all the more reason you might need to put a little bit of extra pressure, but I mean, it's such a tiny needle that probably won't even register as anything. And then, so there might be some more, again, the best information is to talk to your doctor if you are on a very specific medication for a very not common illness. But by and large, again, because of the nature of the vaccine, you are fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. So another question would be, do you have any comments on the vaccine's effectiveness on the variant strains that are being found? I understand there was another one announced in California today. Can you comment on?
Yeah, I think both
Does anyone want?
Frederick and I had we both attacked this question in the chat, so I'll let him go after me. So right now, to my knowledge, and I won't speak for anyone else, but there have been studies ongoing looking at the effectiveness of the vaccines to the new variants that we are finding, and preliminary studies are showing that Moderna and Pfizer vaccines have effectiveness towards some of the variants, but this is very preliminary, so we still need a lot more information on it. It's hopeful, but like I said, we have to keep a watchful eye on whether or not the effectiveness will change.
Mm-hmm. No, I'll too just add that these.
Fred?
Sorry, Tara, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Priedel. No, I was just moderating. Go ahead, Priedel.
Yeah, I was just going to say that these mRNA vaccines are pretty amazing in that they elicit both B and T cell responses. So these are the two types of immune cells that are stimulated once you get vaccinated. And think about this as bringing out all your artillery. The B cells are the ones that will produce your antibodies, and these antibodies will bind to different parts of the spike protein, so they'll be very diverse. And so even with a few mutations here and there, we shouldn't expect that there would be a big loss in the efficacy of these viruses. And also to remember that these T cells, they'll be circulating and killing any infected cells that they come across that have this virus. So these viruses are very, very good. And although, you know, we do feel like they work and should work, there's always constant monitoring, and this speaks to the need to reduce our infections as much as possible, so that there's no more mutations, and we have to vaccinate people as quickly as possible so that we can reduce the chances of this virus spreading more and more and accumulating more infections. So that's sort of a big public health message, that we really want to reduce the chances that this virus has to mutate, because the more people it infects, the more it will divide, and the more it divides, the more likely it will make an error and lead to a mutation that could potentially make it more deadly or even more transmissible.
Interesting.
Or able to not be recognized by the vaccine. Sorry.
I see that an hour has flown by rather quickly. We're coming up on 8 o'clock, and I believe you have other things, calls to get to. But just
I have another session.
yeah. Could you just, as we end things this evening, first I'd like to just say, obviously, thank you to your panel and thank you to everybody for listening. This hour has literally just flown by, and I think we're just scratching the surface of questions that we asked. So maybe what I'm doing is trying to lay a nice groundwork for a follow-up session at some point. But can you just make comments as we close off tonight on other vaccines that are on the horizon and the timeframes on when you think they may be online?
Yeah, so there was...
yes.
Yeah, there was a question about
Do you want to go ahead,
Tara? So there are several that are on the horizon. There's AstraZeneca, which is probably, so it's being reviewed right now. If it passes regulatory review in Canada, that would probably be the next one that's available. It's not so the next vaccines coming are not mRNA vaccines, or not the same. So the AstraZeneca, if it's approved, would probably be next. After that, there are about 5, the Johnson & Johnson, maybe. I've forgotten what the 5th one is now. There are about 5, and they're sort of on the horizon where, once they go through regulatory approval, I would guess that we might be seeing a new one coming out every month or so if it's past regulatory approval. And of course, this will help a lot because we need as much safe vaccine as we can get. And it will also really help for, some of them are single dose, or one of them is single dose. So we just have to wait and see. Everyone is going as fast as they can, but at the same time, we can't rush things. We can't cut corners on safety. We can't cut corners and all of that. So as much as we need them, due diligence has to be done, and it has to be done with as much time as it's going to take to do. And as Fred can tell you, in Health Canada, an enormous proportion of the workforce has been diverted to doing all the regulatory work for these vaccines, since this is going back to what, November, Fred, that this started?
Oh, that started
Huge
way before that.
proportion
They pulled everyone from the get-go just to be ready.
Yeah. So it's been, and this is like this everywhere around the world. Regulatory agencies are they're pausing all absolutely non-essential activities to be able to divert staff to work on this. So, we'll get them as fast as we can, but, we know that the regulatory agencies are working fast. So, we'll know when they let us know. But we don't want to put pressure on, because we don't, things have to take a while to be done properly for us to know they're safe.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so the next 2 vaccines that Tara was talking about that are coming are traditional vaccines, as in those are those types of vaccines are vaccines we've seen before, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a single dose vaccine. So I know a lot of people are excited about that because it means the number of doses that people get are just, that's it. That for each dose, that's one person instead of us needing to double up. So exciting times ahead. We have hope.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you.
Very quickly.
Sorry, I just wanted to say.
Oh no, I was going to say I'll have to go to start the next session. Do you have the link for the 8 to 10 sessions if anyone wants them? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we do, and we'll circulate those.
We'll
circulate those, and
it's in the chat.
Thank you again to you and your team, Dr. Mirardi, and I know a lot of us have gone on sessions, and I think some of the chat room discussions on those sessions are a lot more interesting than ours have been. They've been
oh well, yours has covered a lot of ground. Everyone is welcome. We are there every single night, and we're not going away, and sometimes it's a lot of fun. Sometimes we get a little goofy because we're getting all tired by a certain point at night, but everyone is welcome, and you can come as often as you want, and you can be anonymous. You can do whatever you want. So we're there if you need us.
Great.
And we're happy to serve.
Thank you so much. And again, sincere thanks for this session tonight. Have a good evening.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for having us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
What'd you think? I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, it sure went by quick.
Yeah, it was very, very good. So I've been recording. So I think I can stop the recording now.